out and brave this weather and be here for her and for Stephanie and for Jeanette and Catherine, her mom and sister. So I'm just very grateful that you're here. We worked very hard putting together a service that was true to Amy's feelings and beliefs, and we hope that we accomplished that. You can never do that perfectly, but I think that we got a ways toward it. So just a few things. Please keep your masks on, except if you're reading, when you come up to read, you can take your mask off. Other than that, please keep them on. We're going to start with a song from A Holy Thing to Love by Libby Roderick, and Stephanie McDermott is going to sing that.
It's a human thing, a holy thing, to love what death can take. It's a human thing, to love a thing whose loss will cause your heart to break. It's a funny thing, we can't stop ourselves, even as we wait for the final push. It's a human thing, a funny thing, a holy thing to love. It's a human thing, a holy thing, to love what death can take. It's a human thing, to love a thing whose loss will cause your heart to break. It's a funny thing, we can't stop ourselves, even as we wait for the final push. It's a human thing, a funny thing, a holy thing to love.
There it is.
A reading. Hope as old as fire. Lift up your hearts. Be not afraid, but believing. The strength of your faith glows from a source like a river rushing to the sea. You are not abandoned to gather years too long lost, but a new creation, vibrant with a promise yet to come. Look, even angels wait upon your word, seeing in you the image of the one they serve. Draw deep the breath of courage. Do not despair of any setbacks. Your life is energy itself. Lift up your hearts. You are love made real in all you say and do.
No, that's fine. Thank you very much. Oh, hello to all of you. It's so nice to see you here. And you knew Amy. Amy was a handful from the minute she was born. And I'm here to say that as testimony. It was, she learned to read at 4. And she read very well, and so we had to find a way to get her into school because she was bedeviling her little brother and nagging at Catherine. And of course, I was teaching in the school that they went to, which was a Catholic school, and so I was gone during the day, but we had to do something with her. So we met with a special school board meeting, and they said yes, she could go. So she started kindergarten there at 4, and then she didn't stop. She always pushed, no matter what she said, no matter what I said. Amy always wanted that last word. And the best part of it was, her last word was generally right. So, lots of fun and lots of joy. She was diagnosed with the diabetes at 4 also. And so the whole family just became the brigade that learned everything we could from the doctors, from the books, and absolutely everything. And Amy learned it with us. She knew as much about the disease as I did. And we taught her how to give her own shots, how to test urine samples, what to do if she was feeling faint. And we just kept her going. I never expected her to live as long as she did, but she just surprised all of us in her family to do that. There were many funny instances with Amy, but one of the best ones was one night she was walking by her dad. We were just finishing dinner and he was still at the table, just kind of sitting there, and we were visiting. She walked by and he said, "Amy, I'd like to borrow some of your allowance. Will you loan it to me?" She turned around and looked at him and said, "No, you never pay me back." That was our dear Amy.
I don't think I know everybody here, so I just wanted to say hi. I'm Stephanie, and I wanted to thank Amy's mom, Jeanette, and sister Catherine here for coming, flying into Juneau this morning for this memorial service. And I also wanted to point out two kind of bizarre special guests who Amy had ordered the week before she died, and she said she wanted them both at any activity that she participated in from here on out. So I brought them. They are Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Dr. Fauci. And then I also wanted to share with you, if I can get the mask off in a second, a poem that Amy handed to me about a year ago, and she said it called to her, and she said it was true. And she said it was true like love is true. Like love in the face of loss, all loss, even the ultimate loss, is true. And she said the poem was about the community of humanity. And I think it's also about how that community transcends loss and grief. And it's also a poem about peace, which was very important to Amy. So I want to share it with you now to honor Amy and the things she valued and fought for. And it's in your leaflets, and it's called Pray for Peace. It's by Ellen Bass. Pray to whomever you kneel down to. Jesus, nailed on his wooden or plastic cross, his suffering face bent to kiss you. Buddha, still under the bow tree in scorching heat. Adonai, Allah, raise your arms to Mary, that she may lay her palm on her brows. To Shekinah, Queen of heaven and earth, to Inanna in her strict descent. Then pray to the bus driver who takes you to work. On the bus, pray for everyone riding the bus, for everyone riding buses all over the world. Drop some silver and pray. Waiting in line for the movies, for the ATM, for your latte and croissant, offer your plea. Make your eating and drinking a supplication. Make your slicing of carrots a holy act, each translucent layer of an onion a deeper prayer. To hawk or wolf or the great whale, pray. Bow down to terriers and shepherds and Siamese cats, fields of artichokes and elegant strawberries. Make the brushing of your hair a prayer, every strand its own voice singing in the choir on your head. As you wash your face, the water slipping through your fingers, a prayer. Water, softest thing on earth, gentleness that wears away rock. Making love, of course, is already prayer, skin and open mouths, worshiping that skin. The fragile cases we are poured into. If you're hungry, pray. If you're tired, Pray to Gandhi and Dorothy Day, Shakespeare, Sappho, Sojourner Truth. When you walk to your car, to the mailbox, to the video store, let each step be a prayer. That we all keep our legs, that we do not blow off anyone else's legs or crush their skulls. And if you're riding on a bicycle or a skateboard in a wheelchair, each revolution of the wheels a prayer as the earth revolves. Less harm, less harm, less harm. And as you work typing with a new manicure, a tiny palm tree painted on one pearlescent nail, or delivering soda, or drawing good blood with rubber-capped vials, writing on a blackboard with yellow chalk, twirling pizzas. With each breath in, take in the faith of those who have believed when belief seemed foolish, who persevered. With each breath out, cherish. Pull weeds for peace. Turn over in your sleep for peace. Feed the birds. Each shiny seed that spills onto the earth, another second of peace. Wash your dishes, call your mother, drink wine. Shovel leaves or snow or trash from your sidewalk. Make a path. Fold a photo of a dead child around your Visa card. Scoop your holy water from the gutter. Gnaw your crust. Mumble along like a crazy person, stumbling your prayer through the streets. And I'd like to thank all of you for being here to honor Amy. Thank you so very, very much. And I'd like to tell you about something that happened about 5 years ago when the alarm clock went off at 3 a.m. And to this day, we don't know why. Amy said she didn't touch it. And even if she did somehow accidentally set it to ring, she never ever changed the time from 6 a.m. when she got up each morning. Anyway, about 5 years ago, it rang and rang and rang at 3 a.m. And she just lay there and let it ring, and I was absolutely furious. And I finally shook her to get her to get up and turn it off. And that's when I realized she was unconscious. And afterwards, she didn't remember anything. Not the paramedics, not the resuscitation, nothing until she was sitting up in bed and saying, "I'm really hungry." We never ever found out why or how the alarm clock went off at 3 a.m. But we did find out later that if it hadn't gone off and woken me up so I could call the paramedics, Amy likely would not have survived, and we wouldn't have had those additional 5 years with her. And for those of you who knew Amy, you can only imagine that only Amy would claim or complain about being hungry after that kind of activity. There was something wonderful about eating with Amy. For those of you who've done it, you know, she ate with absolute gusto and delight, and she did so in such a way that you couldn't help but share her pleasure. Each bite was a joy, and each specific moment was a joy, and that's how Amy approached life. So after the 3 a.m. alarm clock episode, if I got up first, I always called out to make sure Amy was okay before I left the house. And this last time I got up to take Brewster for a walk. Brewster's now in the car after his bad behavior in here. And I yelled bye as we went out, and there was no answer. And when I ran to her, I knew she had fallen asleep reading, and it was during that sleep that she left us. This time there was no alarm, no 3 a.m. And I think this time Amy would have been so relieved if she could have known this is the way that she would go. Amy had heart failure and cardiomyopathy as complications of diabetes, as well as other complications less serious. And she hated all the medical fuss and bother. And she loved staying up all night reading. And so I'm so happy that she passed away peacefully at home, safe and warm in her own bed, not in a hospital bed, reading one of her beloved, enormous, really boring history books. Not a hospital charge and not a medical procedure. And I just comment that Amy was the most real, most authentic person I've ever known. She wore her heart on her sleeve, and she shared her joys and her sorrows freely. You always knew where you stood with Amy. She had no use whatsoever for pretense. And that kind of honesty and authenticity could sometimes be disconcerting. But I learned that Amy always communicated from a base of love and care. And she also, as those of you who know her know, had an absolutely outrageous, delightful sense of humor. I'm not even going to try and describe it. She could find humor everywhere, and she loved to share that humor in the most delightful ways. A friend who knew Amy before I met her, which was something like 30 years ago, loves to reminisce about how Amy raised hell on her Honda Rebel, riding that motorcycle around Anchorage like a bat out of hell, and I wish I could have seen that. I can certainly imagine it, knowing Amy. That was before my time, but it just sounds so classically Amy. So a couple of my favorite memories that I wanted to share. One is this particularly vile specimen. You may, those of you who know Amy will recognize it as her coffee cup. She had it for literally decades, and she completely refused to get a new one. And even though I bought multiple new ones, she completely refused to use them, saying, "Well, this one's still got plenty of utility." As you can see, it's held together by duct tape and God knows what else. I'm reluctant to even think about it. Every time I look at it, I want an antibiotic. But it was just classically Amy. It still has utility. It's time to keep using it. And another thing that I remember, I like to remember about Amy is her collection of rocks. Amy could look at a pile of rubble and see incredible beauty. She picked up rocks and she loved them, noting, "Oh, this one looks just like the Venus of Willendorf." Or, "This one is an example of some really esoteric geologic process that means nothing to me, but delighted her beyond words." And she looked at people exactly the same way that she looked at those rocks, seeing the individual beauty and the dignity and the worth of every single person she came into contact with. Being loved by Amy was a gift, and a gift that she gave many people over her life. And in that way, Amy lives on in those of us who are better people, who love more, because she loved us. I got a card last week from an address I didn't recognize, which started out by saying, "Hi Stephanie, my name is Sherry and we've never met." And then Sherry, who I've never met, went on to say, Amy helped her and many people in need by spending countless hours with them on the phone, listening and supporting and giving them the gift of her love and the wisdom of her experience in ways that changed their lives. What I do know is being Amy, that's just what she did. She never thought about it, and she never asked for anything in return. Not sure what else to say about Amy. There's so much to say, and we had such beautiful adventures together. Although we shared our lives for over 25 years, today would have been the 7th anniversary of our marriage. 7 years ago, today, we were headed to the Panama Canal with a stop in Seattle, and same-sex marriage had just become legal. So we arranged to overnight in Seattle and to have a magistrate come to our hotel and marry us that evening. And then we were on the early flight to Miami, where we were going to pick up a cruise ship to the Panama Canal. Anyway, this being Juneau, the weather was horrible. It got worse and worse. The flight was delayed and delayed. We were supposed to get into Seattle that afternoon, and the plane didn't even leave Juneau until after midnight. I'd been texting the magistrate throughout the ordeal, letting him know of the delays and concerned that this marriage wouldn't happen after all. And he reassured me that he'd come to the airport if necessary and marry us. So it came that we were married at SeaTac at, it's another 3 a.m. in the morning, at baggage carousel #1. And we flagged down 2 passersby and asked them to be the required witnesses. And I will never forget the one man who said, "They're never going to believe it when I get home and tell them what I did." And suffice it to say, that's what life with Amy feels like. The most amazing, wonderful adventure I ever had. There was life before Amy, And then there was a wonderful life with Amy, and now it's our challenge to live life without Amy. But the years with Amy feel like the most marvelous, wild ride of sometimes pain, especially dealing with the complications of 50 years of diabetes, but mostly joy and deep, abiding love that lives on in all of us who knew her. So thank you for being here to honor her and for sharing her with all of us. Thank you.
This is for Stephanie, Amy, and love. In our lifetime, measured in human constructs of seconds, minutes, days, and years, we're held captive. We are faced with beginnings and endings, some by design and others with no sense of design at all. If we are fortunate, the stars align, the tides find the moon, and we are joined on our journey by profound love. It is this love, given and received, that becomes the story of our lives, the legacy that marks indelibly that we have traveled this road in gratitude and sustained by grace. Thank you, dear.
I just want to say a couple things, and then I have a poem to read you. I wish I'd had more time to know Amy. I didn't have much time to know her at all. When I first met her, I thought, she's so tiny. But her tininess belied the strength of spirit, the greatness of personhood, the enormity of courage that I later learned she had. I always thought it took guts for her to walk into our coffee hour at St. Brendan's, because I'm sure she thought that at some point the other shoe would drop and she would get blasted with some call to conversion. And I'm proud of my church that nobody there ever did that. We found her perfect just the way she was. And we're so grateful, Stephanie, that you introduced her to us. So, this little, mighty, wonderful person brought so much to us, and for that I'm grateful. This is a poem from a book of peace by Catherine DeMay. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. It may all come undone, the patiently woven cloth, the shawl of homespun wool. Already now the threads are being pulled, life unravels at the edges, burying the flesh, showing the scars, the grooves dug deep in the flesh by chain and rope. It may all come undone before we have had time to hold all the parts together, before we can gather evidence, declare ourselves alive, say yes. We love the sweeter, green-sleeved in this new spring. It is all too quick, too soon. Birth and death, the span between the poles, crossed over with a few steps. And yet, beneath the movements, the tearing, there are loving hands at work, mending the raveling pattern, catching the threads, weaving them back one by one into the ancient cloth.
Hello everybody, my My name's Torvald. I'm from 200 miles south of Anchorage on the Kenai Peninsula. Amy Omar, my friend, our friend. Her passing makes me sad as I selfishly think of the hole left in my life as a result of her absence. Simply put, we shared a lot of joy in sometimes a gray world. I've never mastered the thoughtful pause that Amy utilized as she would pick her words carefully, so you get my condensed version of several days' contemplation of time as I shared with Amy. If I had to describe Amy in 2 words, they would be uniquely brilliant. We met over 20 years ago at a grassroots fellowship event that focused on the commonality of a trait, if you will, of our imperfect human condition. Though the fellowship, it's been found that restoration can happen. It just requires a willingness to practice some principles. Chiefly among them is helping the next person discover the same recovery. This was the basis of our friendship, as well as the reoccurring theme of our several times a year meeting at events all over Alaska and the western United States. The experiences we enjoyed along the way, before, after, or during these events, are memories of a lifetime. Who knew activities like dining at Wings and Things, like hiking the trails around Juneau, or visiting Rooster Cogburn's ostrich ranch on the way to Tucson last March could be so fun. Now, here's the amazing thing. Amy and I come from backgrounds that suggest that we would not normally mix, and yet we carried on an uninterrupted over 20-year friendship. How could that be? Well, we focused on the reasons our lives intersected and never let things like gender, politics, orientation, or religion get in the way of what really is important during our short period of time here on Earth. What a novel approach. Amy, besides being a friend, was a mentor to me. She often had this uncanny knack to an insight or explanation that she would articulate in a way that I would go, well, of course, that makes perfect sense. And I wasn't the only one she had that effect on. As we shared a very large circle of friends, on hearing of Amy's passing, I knew there were several that would want to know, as they shared the same love and respect for Amy. This involved calls to New York, Florida, Utah, Hawaii, and many points in between. In closing, I would be remiss if I did not take a moment to thank both of our spouses, Stephanie and Laura. Thank you, thank you. And Amy, you brought a dimension to my life I never thought possible. I thank you and love you for it. Perhaps we'll meet again. Your friend, Torvald.
Amy always appreciated my teacher voice, so I don't need to remove my mask for all of you. Passage from Celtic Christian spirituality. Come home to yourself. May all that is unforgiven in you be released. May your fears yield their deepest tranquilities. May all that is unlived in you blossom into a future graced with love.
And this is a reading from Hope as Old as Fire. Give your heart to God, your mind to mystery, your hands to those in need. Religion is not rituals we perform, words we insist must be obeyed, the fancy dress we wear. It's how we behave when no one's watching. It's how we pray when we are alone. How we care when caring is the only reward. Eternity exists in the everyday, as familiar as the streets we walk. We may pretend we have ordered the infinite, but in God's realm, love is our only currency, and faith our passport to peace. And there's a reading from Bruce, and Bruce had emailed me and said that he's unfortunately unwell, and he sent me his reflection, so I'm going to read it, and I think you're going to love it as much as I did. So this is a reflection from Bruce D. And Bruce said, pretend I'm taller and thinner than a guy. One of my first conversations with Amy was after I bristled on hearing about folks visiting from Washington that would be hosting a workshop. I complained about outside experts telling us how to do things, and she provided me an important lesson on general service and learning from others, rather bluntly. But her words were true and warm. Amy and I served together when she was a delegate and I was a DCM, and thus she was at the end of her official service career and I was just beginning. She continued to attend area assemblies and events for the next 16 years, and her dedication to helping others was paramount in her life. She served as a mentor to many. The highlight of many weeks in Juneau was breakfast with Amy and others following Saturday morning meetings. My God, that woman could eat. Amy's view of non-material matters helped me with my own pursuit of spiritual views that made sense to me. We would sometimes scratch our heads at some of the more overt religious views expressed by others, but she was quick to support everyone in their own values. Amy honored confidences in a way that engendered trust. Amy and I shared lots of tears as well as laughs. On one occasion, the topic of firearms came up, and I asked her what she thought about the issue. And I can just hear Amy responding to Bruce. The last thing you want, she said, is a bunch of lesbians running around with handguns.
And now we have something for all of us to read together. Actually, we've got two things to read together. One is a version of what we know as the Lord's Prayer, and there's also a section from the Serenity Prayer. So let's read the next things together. Eternal Spirit, Earth Maker, Pain Bearer, Life Giver, Source of all that shall be, Father and Mother of us all, loving God, in whom is heaven, may the hallowing of your name echo through the universe. May the way of your justice be followed by the peoples of the world. May your heavenly will be done by all created beings. May your commonwealth of peace and freedom sustain our hope, and may it come on earth. With the bread that we need for today, feed us. In the hurts that we absorb from one another, forgive us. In times of temptation and test, strengthen us. From trials too great to endure, spare us. From the grip of this evil, free us. For you reign in the glory of power that is love, now and forever, now and forevermore. Amen. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. And now Stephanie and I are going to attempt to sing together. This Stephanie. Our church has 3 Stephanies.
Every star in heaven is singing all through the night. Hear the glorious music ringing all through the night. Songs of sweet ethereal lightness, light in realms of peace and whiteness. See the dark gives way.
Spirit of God is upon you. The Spirit of God strengthen you. The Spirit of God guide you. The Spirit of God protect you. The Spirit of God enlighten you. The Spirit of God fill you today and evermore. Today and evermore. God of peace, relax the tensions of our bodies, still the anxieties of our minds, calm the storms of our hearts, give us courage to wait. Let peace flow in us, through us, from us, the deep, deep peace of God. And may we give thanks together for the gift that is Amy and the fact that her last gift to us was to bring us together.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being here.
Thank you very much. Thanks, I appreciate it. Nice to see you, Jen.